Paul Kaplar, Farm Bureau Insurance.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, welcome in. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I guess just to get it out there, full disclosure, have handled my personal insurance needs for auto, business auto, homeowners.
Yep.
So I appreciate helping me out.
Well, appreciate the opportunity. It's always kind of same business as you, relationships and having somebody to look after you and got somebody in your corner. God forbid something happens and you need somebody to help you out.
Yeah, well, funny story about something happening. Literally like hours after signing the policy, I get into a little fender bender and have to call you and ask, hey, Paul, what do I do about this, right?
It never fails. It's like something's going to happen usually when you change or, you buy a new car. It just seems to be when claims or something happens in times like that. So
Yep.
That's why we're there.
And we are entering into, as of right now, hurricane season here in North Carolina. Pretty important to have your homeowner's insurance up to date.
It is, and it's one of those things you can't buy when you need it. They got this thing with it, they call it the box. So once that storm enters into that coordinate, essentially you can't bind insurance anymore. So, if there's a hurricane coming and you say, hey, you know what, now's a good time to review my insurance and get something in place, you're going to be out of luck.
Now, a lot of people probably have not reviewed insurance coverage, maybe for a number of years, and the way property values are here in North Carolina,
yes,
home could be worth a whole lot more than the insurance policy covers, right?
Absolutely. Now, fortunately, with any of what we call an HO3 homeowners policy, they are 125% replacement cost. So you've got a little cushion, so don't panic. But in the last 2 years, we've seen tremendous amount of inflation, and it's definitely a good time to say, hey, if I've got a $300,000 home, can I still rebuild it for that? And one thing, folks will get it appraised. Keep in mind, rebuilding cost and appraisals are different because number one, the land's not going anywhere. And two, the cost to rebuild is different than what you could sell it for. So oftentimes folks get an appraisal, say, whoa, I'm severely underinsured, and really they may not be. So
Okay.
that's why you got an agent to look at that stuff.
And I've heard that it probably makes sense to shop around every few years anyway, because unfortunately, it seems in the world we live in, like existing customers get the worst deals available, where new customers sometimes get a better deal or incentive to sign up. Have you seen or experienced that?
There are some companies that do that. So some of these national companies that operate in 50 states will say, look, we want to get some market share in North Carolina. So we're going to come in with some entry level, great premiums, but then in a year, all of a sudden they skyrocket. But they've captured that business and now they've increased the premium. So in that case, yes, it is a good idea to shop it around. Now, with Farm Bureau, we're local to North Carolina. Our home office is on Glenwood Avenue. We only do business in North Carolina. So we've got to remain competitive. We're not always the cheapest, but we're going to be very competitive. And it's you get our best rate right out of the gate.
Okay. So being local, how long has Farm Bureau been around? And how long have you been with Farm Bureau?
So I started April 1st, 2009. So I'm 14 years, be 15 this coming April, and seen a lot of change in that time frame. But Farm Bureau's been around since the 50s. It started in Pitt County by some farmers, and it started with farm insurance and auto insurance, and just kind of has grown from there. And their home office is now located in Raleigh off Glenwood, like we talked. And they're just a grassroots organization that looks after the folks in North Carolina.
And it's not just you, Paul, there and insuring and backing the policies. You've got a team in your office, and then the power of Farm Bureau behind you.
We do, yeah. So in our office, we've got, we've got 23 folks in our office. So we've got a great team in place. And then, of course, the staff back at the home office in Raleigh with the underwriters. And, actually, there's two sides of Farm Bureau with the Federation. So each county is made up of a board of local farmers, and they actually own our buildings. And then the insurance company rents those buildings. So they're doing the Farm Bureau, Federation, farming, voice of the ag community, and then we're doing the insurance side.
I used to do the ag report on the morning Farm Bureau network. Yeah, it was because farmers get up early.
They do.
Now, actually, another kind of interesting story I once heard, and it's always stuck with me. The saying, "He bought the farm."
Yeah.
And of course, it means somebody passed away. Well, farmers used to take out huge mortgages so that they could have land to farm. And that mortgage would generally last a lifetime, as is the root of mortgage, is more for life.
Right.
Well, they pass away, and the insurance helps the family pay for the farm. He bought the farm.
That's right.
Is where that saying comes from. So Farm Bureau probably helped a lot of families preserve family land.
We do, and that's the life insurance piece of it, and exactly like these farmers would, if there was a piece of another farm right next door, well, they would get it, and they'd keep growing, and they'd have a line of credit. But if something happened, the life insurance steps in, pays all that off, and then the next generation came in behind it and kept building.
Yep.
So
the cost of insurance, we hear from time to time, can go up. And we are in one of those periods where basically the companies say, hey, the liabilities that we have, the cost of insuring has gone up, and therefore the cost of the actual insurance goes up. And we are, again, kind of in one of those periods of time right now, right?
We are, and we're getting lots of calls, and we're not immune to it. Like we probably had a 12% increase on our homeowners line and a 7% increase on our auto line.
But that's not just you. That's not just Farm Bureau. That is kind of industry
wise. So what's happening, with the car that was $64,000 3 years ago is now an $80,000 vehicle. The parts are more expensive. The parts are taking longer to get in. So folks are maximizing their rental car coverage. And same way with the cost of goods on a home loss. Lumber really spiked. It's come back down some, but just the cost to rebuild and get people back to normal has really skyrocketed, COVID and post-COVID. So as a result, we've had to see some increases, and it's just
how do we as the consumer handle that or help offset or combat that?
So what we're doing is oftentimes folks have not reviewed. So like that house that we initially insured for $300,000 is now up to a $420,000 house. Look, hey, is that still in line? We'll do a cost estimator. We can back that coverage down. I know we talked before, like a lot of these folks had what we call a split deductible. So they had a $500 like section 1. So if there was anything other than a wind hail loss, they had a $500 responsibility, $1,000 wind hail responsibility. But by jumping that up to a $2,500 deductible, we could save them anywhere from $250 to $300 a year, which usually more than offset the increase that we just experienced. So
insurance is a lot about numbers, a lot about actuarial figures and the chance of something happening, right? And so that deductible is basically what you have to come out of pocket if that event occurs.
That's right.
But the likelihood of that occurring, maybe if you raise that deductible, lowers the monthly
exactly.
premium.
And so if you had that $1,000 deductible and you're saving $500 a year by going with the $2,500, you've more than offset the increased $1,500 out of pocket statistically by having that higher deductible.
And these are the conversations that you helped walk me through as we were considering coverage, and this is what you do for your clients.
That's exactly right. And I was my dad's Army, so when I turned 16, I had USAA, and it was always like, well, if you have USAA, you don't need to go anywhere. But when I got to Farm Bureau, you realize we are very highly respected in the body shop community, and then in just on the claim side when it matters, that we're going to take care of you.
Being local matters. It's why we have local agents whose hometown is your town, and that's why we're proud to have North Carolina in our name. North Carolina Farm Bureau Insurance, helping you is what we do best.
North Carolina Farm Bureau Insurance. We're not just local, we're the best in the nation for the 4th year in a row. Our secret? Treat your car like it's ours and treat you like a friend. Helping you is what we do best.
Yeah. We are also in a networking group. Like if I don't handle something, I know somebody who does kind of group, right? And there's a few different insurance licensed professionals within the group, right? And you would think, well, insurance is insurance, but there's completely different types of insurance. And your focus really is in the property casualty
Yeah, our personal lines and what we call Main Street business.
Okay.
But like any restaurant, any like large square footage business, we're typically not in the game, or we can't even write it. And that's where, partnering with Rob in our group, I mean, he's tremendous. And we share a lot of referrals back and forth because he's able to do stuff that we can't.
Okay.
So it works out great. Having that team approach of, hey, appreciate you reaching out to me. I can't do this, but
Sure.
Rob can.
Yeah.
So it's great.
So who are kind of the people that typically you are able to help and assist?
So anyone, we do a lot of carpentry, a lot of general contractors, landscapers, any kind of just anything like you might see up Main Street USA, just that small business. It's, not really your high risk. Like we really don't like, roofing, power washing, things where there's a high risk involved with it. We can do some of that stuff, but we're not competitive.
And then for individuals, anyone who owns a car or a home?
Anyone that owns a car or home or rents, that
Rent too. Okay.
we can do content policies and, that's,
Renters might not think about that.
they don't, the only time they typically think about it is if their apartment complex says, hey, you got to have it. But one of the biggest pieces of that, and the reason why, is let's say that washing machine bursts in their apartment and floods the unit below.
Not just their stuff. It's somebody.
So that liability is then covering the damage to the other units as a result of what happened in yours. So that's what folks don't think about, and that's what we do. And
until they're liable for it.
people don't think about insurance until they get a higher bill or a claim, and that's usually when they realize, oh shoot, I don't have that coverage in place.
And I talk with a lot of my clients who are planning and preparing for the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I tell them after talking with them that the highest priorities are those things that you cannot handle the day after you need to have them done. The legal documents.
That's right.
And the insurance coverage, right?
That's right. Exactly. And, you can't buy it when you need it. And there's things that, oftentimes just little things like jewelry, like a lot of folks don't realize there's only $1,500 of jewelry coverage in your homeowner's policy. And that's subject to your deductible. So if you have that $2,500 deductible, well, you're going to have a pretty considerable loss before it steps in. Well, we can schedule it. It's $1 per $100 of coverage, zero deductible, and it's covered.
Luckily, I'm not a big jewelry guy, but my wife is big jewelry gal, so might need to check that out too.
So yeah, that's one of those things. We just need an appraisal within 5 years to show the value,
Mm-hmm.
and we can get it covered. And also too, like a lot of folks have pretty, significant gun collections. You get $10,000 in your standard coverage on your homeowners, but again, we can schedule it on an inland marine, and then you got the coverage away from premises. So if you're out hunting or at the gun range and it disappears, you've got that.
Or that boating accident where I lose all my guns.
Yeah, that's right. They just disappear. So
it happens. No, look, appreciate you being on the program. All jokes aside, this is important for people to not only have, but continue to keep updated as their life changes, as the value of things change, and certainly have in place if what if this happens does actually happen, right?
That's exactly right. And it's just one of those things that you want to be mindful and look at every year. And going back, a lot of folks escrow for their home insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it's out of sight, out of mind. The only time they may think about it is if they get an escrow analysis and it goes up. And why did it go up? Well, my insurance went up. Then they call.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things you really want to make it a point to once a year. We try to do a good job of reaching out, at the renewals, saying, hey, has anything changed? Have you paid anything off? Have you made any additions? And just try to make sure that we're covering risk that customer has, because we can't insure a risk we don't know about.
So if we've done any remodels, additions, things like that, another cue that it's time to.
That's right. And we're seeing a lot too, like a lot of folks putting solar panels on their roof. And once something's permanently affixed to a structure, it goes under that coverage A. So if you're adding $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of solar panels, you may want to call your agent and say, hey, am I sufficiently covered?
Good to know. Because a lot of people are doing that. I've seen a couple in my neighborhood doing that recently. So, Paul, oftentimes when we hear insurance commercials, it's all about save money, save money. And of course, we want to be frugal and not overpay for things. But why should we consider that approach when it comes to insurance?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And oftentimes, as you mentioned, insurance is kind of marketed as a commodity and save money, save 40%, save this, save that. But in the event you have a claim, you want to make sure you've got the coverage in place. And Farm Bureau is very competitive. And oftentimes we do save you money, but oftentimes we don't. I'll give you an example. I had a customer that had called in and they removed their what we call extended transportation. That provides the rental car for you while your car's being fixed. We're talking it's $10 every 6 months, but he was trying to save money.
Mm-hmm.
Like we mentioned, a week later he has a claim. Hey, do I have a rental car? Well, you remember we just took that off. And he said, remember my story, because do not let anybody remove that coverage, because it's really put me in a bind.
Right.
And so,
I mean, rental cars, couple $100 a day, maybe, or at least several hundred a week.
So we've seen an increase in that. So we typically would do $30 a day up to $900. Now, I think you can get like basically the smallest car enterprise offers for that amount per day. So we're really encouraging folks to go with a $50 a day limit. You can go up to 75. So there's other options, and that's where talking with your agent can really, really help you. And there's no curveballs in the event you got a claim.
But for the cost of $10 per 6 months,
it's minimal.
Probably worth it.
That's right. And little things, a lot of folks carry a $500 comprehensive deductible. Your glass coverage falls under there. So if you go with a zero, it's usually maybe $40 more every 6 months, but then you don't come out of pocket for a windshield. Windshields on the average are probably between $250 and $500. So you're right there where it's right at your deductible, and it's really having that $500, you're probably going to pay out of pocket for it.
What's the difference between collision and liability?
So we have what's called physical damages, which is your comprehensive and your collision. So that's when you've hit somebody, on the collision side, property damage is going to cover that, and the collision is going to fix your vehicle. And that's, to answer your first question, the liability is property damage. So we're encouraging folks to carry at least 100,000 there. Typically 50 used to be sufficient, but a Tahoe right now just a run, going to cost you 65, 70 grand. So you want to make sure if you hit one, you can pay for it.
Yeah.
And to build on that, the state minimums are 30,000 per person up to 60,000 per occurrence, with 25,000 of property damage. That's the state minimum. If you have those, you're going to be in a really bad situation should you hurt somebody or hit something of value greater than 25,000. So that's where, if you're saving money by going with the lowest limit, in the event of a claim, you could be severely underinsured and really expose your assets because you're not properly covered.
Yeah. Again, important to talk to your agent. And if you don't have an agent, if you're just a number, have somebody that you can talk to. And that's where the term agent, I don't think suffices.
That's right. I really like to think of myself as an advisor, because we want to look at your need. Everyone's needs are different, and what you might need is different than what your neighbor might need. And if they're just listening to the TV or
30-second commercial,
that's right. That's like, hey, my situation's different, and we want to make sure we understand that. Another area that we've seen lately that people don't realize is if you got yourself or a child that's doing DoorDash or that's doing an Uber or a Lyft type situation, a lot of folks don't realize that once you start doing that, you become for hire, and your personal auto would not cover you. So you want to make sure you're talking to your advisor on that to make sure that hey, we can cover that. We just got to put the right policy.
We have a lot of people in the gig economy doing DoorDash and Uber and Lyft and those kind of things. And then your story about the additional protection for renting a car. These are cautionary tales here.
That's it. And unfortunately, you learn about these when people don't have it, and that's where
I think that's the value of the advisor. Is a lot of people don't know about these until they have to go through it, where an agent, an advisor has seen hundreds, if not thousands of cases of people who didn't know things and until they went through them, but we have the benefit of that experience of others to share.
Exactly. And that's where we come in and just make those recommendations. One thing too, it's called water backup and sump overflow on your homeowner.
Yep.
You know, if the water's brown, it's not going to be covered. So if anything comes up, that's not covered unless you endorse for it. So we endorse, you can do it in $5, $10, $15, and $25,000 increments. So if you've got a lot of hardwood floors, you know, make sure you've got that endorsement, because you don't want to be in a surprise situation and something happens and you find out you don't have coverage.
And then if you are, we know a guy for that too, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Any other good examples, stories that come to mind of, hey, people might not know about this, but here is an important element, or just a, hey, this turned out well or poorly that people could benefit from?
Yeah, and really, so basically your big exclusions on a home policy are your sinkhole collapse, earthquake, and flood. And we can cover the earthquake. It's very rare.
We've seen some in North Carolina.
We've seen some, and
thankfully
we've actually had one in Fuquay, and it's probably 10 years ago, but I felt it.
Yep.
And then the flood. And going back to your, I think, first question, the flood insurance, you can either buy it at closing, or if you don't buy it at closing, it's a 30-day wait. So if that hurricane's out there and you're like, hey, now's the time for flood insurance, it's going to be a 30-day wait, you know, from time of application to get that flood policy going. And the federal flood program, basically you got $250,000 of content coverage. And if you need excess, we've got markets for that. But typically that's, you know, things that folks don't think about until, there's a hurricane looming, or they notice that they're by a rising body of water and, oh, maybe I do need that.
Yeah, so, but it's planning ahead. It's not reacting. You can't be reactionary with these kind of things. Be
proactive. That's what I encourage folks to do. And don't, you know, it's great to save money, but what's it really going to cost you?
The price check gun might not be your best friend there, right?
It's not. And because if, you know, saving $10 every 6 months costs you another $1,500 in a rental car, did you really save the money? And so just being mindful of that stuff, and we try not to have any surprises come claim time.
Paul Kaplar, Farm Bureau Insurance. Yep. If somebody needs to do a checkup or review their coverage, how can they be in touch?
Hey, you can contact me via phone, email, text, and we've got web address is ncfbins.com. You can just search me by name, Paul Kaplar, and I'll come right up, and certainly glad to talk to anybody.
All right. Appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.